Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies, I could not join you in Mussoorie much as I had wanted to, and it's the second time in a row that I have not been able to connect with your program. But a program with the Honorable Prime Minister came up this evening, and therefore I've had to come back to Delhi from Gorakhpur where I was yesterday. I'm sorry also I'm slightly late, but I had a puja at home in the morning and could not make it in time for your session. I'm also delighted that IMA is putting together this group of thinkers to try and evolve new strategies, look at what's happening in and around the world, particularly focused on India, and preparing a roadmap going forward to see how all of you and maybe all of us together can make a difference to India, to the world, to all the people of the world. And in that sense, strategy or business strategy that you have got together to discuss, or the CEO strategy roundtable that you are having there, in some sense is very important because just as J.C. Penney, the founder of the department stores, said, growth is never by mere chance. It's when all the forces work together that one can look at growth. And in some way, electricity is a great and integral fulcrum of any growth that one has to strategize, that one has to plan for. It empowers people, it equips people, it enables growth, and in some sense also acts as a great and a very powerful tool to make people get a better quality of life, to help people get good quality of education, health, jobs or working opportunities, make them self-dependent, independent of government doles. And I'm delighted that I have this opportunity to try and turn around and empower the fortunes of the people of India through this electricity sector. I was asked to cover 6 or 7 subjects, so I'll spend a minute on each. There was a query about India's energy situation 5 years from now. We've seen India growing at about 7% in the last 2 years in terms of energy consumption. This is also coupled with a huge thrust on energy efficiency. So in some sense, it could actually have been slightly more growth, but for the fact that we've also planned for energy efficiency in a big way. And for the first time in these 2 years, we've changed the coefficient of electricity growth and GDP growth, which usually used to be about 0.85% of the GDP growth number. So if you take the 10 years before I became minister, electricity growth in India was at about 5.65% CAGR. In the last 2 years, we've grown at about 7% CAGR. So we can clearly see that the coefficient is moving closer towards 1 than the earlier 0.8, 0.85. And therefore, one can safely assume that given the huge thrust to economic growth that this government has done, I'm quite confident we'll close this year upward of 8% GDP growth. And personally, I believe the next decade or two, India can easily pitch for double-digit growth going forward. And therefore, if one was to take the growth in the power sector in the next 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised if it's at about 1.6 times what it is today. And on a longer perspective, I think by 2030, India should target about 3.5 to 4 times the electricity generation that we are doing today. There was a question about the electricity mix and how we will balance competing electricity sources. I think the renewable energy program that India has embarked on is possibly the most ambitious program anywhere in the world. Having said that, we cannot deny that there is an imperative for affordable energy, particularly for the poor of India, particularly for the farmers in India, to encourage more industry and growth in different sectors. And therefore, coal, thermal-based coal plants, power plants based on coal, thermal plants will continue to have a very predominant role in India. But what we are doing is making them more efficient. We are having cleaner coal technologies. We are researching to see what we can do with carbon capture. We are focusing on supercritical and ultra supercritical technology going forward. We are looking at phasing out the old plants so that inefficient plants can be out of the system. We are looking at seeing how we can try to wash coal, crush coal, improve the quality of coal. Some of these measures have already borne fruit. We've been able to improve the SHR, the station heat rate, by about 3% in the last 2 years. We have reduced the freight of coal by rationalizing the coal linkages and allowing freely companies to swap their coal suppliers so that the freight element is reduced and consequent pollution is kept to a bare bones minimum. We believe by 2030, India's carbon intensity per unit of GDP will be significantly lower than what it is today. Also, we'll be having about 40% of our installed capacity coming out of renewable sources. Energy efficiency is a major pillar of our plans for the electricity sector going forward. Just our single LED program, by which we hope to replace all the LED lights, all the incandescent and CFL bulbs and tube lights with LED lighting, and the street lights with LED street lights alone, this one program alone, will help India save 118 billion units of electricity consumption annually. It will bring down carbon dioxide emission by about between 60 and 80 million tons per year. It will avoid peak capacity of about 20 to 22 gigawatts, saving nearly $6 to $6.5 billion in electricity bills for the consumers of India annually. $6 to $6.5 billion. Of course, this will also save about $20 billion of capex on new coal-based plants to service the requirements of the country. Questions were asked about the challenges in the mining and coal sector. Actually, there are no challenges. There are only opportunities in these sectors. I was talking to a large international company day before yesterday, and I got the impression that India is still at the very bottom of the potential of the mining sector. We have miles to go in this sector. We can almost double the output of the various minerals that are mined in India in the next 4 or 5 years. We are looking at bringing in efficiency in mining, reducing the pollution that has usually been associated with mining. We are looking at improving safety standards in these mines, and our focus largely to encourage growth in this sector has been on transparency and equal opportunity for all. We used the cancellation of coal mines in September 2014 to good effect to bring in a robust framework by which we have ensured that in the future all mines or natural resources of this country can only be given out through a transparent, honest process. In fact, I'll quote from the Dalai Lama, lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity. And I think that's what we are trying to change in this sector. Make sure everything is transparent, open, everybody has an equal opportunity to participate in the growth story in mining, and therefore bring in a great deal of security to investors and businessmen in this sector. Of course, the mining sector largely is with the states. I have to work very closely with the states to help auction the mines, to help provide mining leases, expedite land acquisition, expedite environmental clearances so that mining can take a leap forward. But I'm happy to share with you that all the states understand that promoting mining and encouraging greater production only helps them increase their revenues, and that revenue can go to serve the people of their state better. In fact, one very important initiative of this government to help mining activities improve the lifestyle of the people in the mining areas has been the District Mineral Foundation, through which about $1 billion will go every year straight to those districts, those areas where mining is carried out, to improve the lives of those people, better drinking water, better quality of education, afforestation, various initiatives in these mining areas. I was asked to speak about renewable energy and to do more in renewable energy and concentrate less on fossil fuels. On a theoretical basis, that's a wonderful statement. I cannot but agree with you. But one will also have to balance the grid and the requirements of 24/7 power. So I can't tell the people of India, because the United States of America or Europe or Australia have messed up the environment, has spewed so much greenhouse gases that today the world is at threat. Therefore, Indians will have to pay the cost for that pollution. Indians will have to be deprived of a basic amenity like electricity. And Indians will have to only focus on renewable energy and probably pay twice as much for energy. And taking the argument forward, maybe after 6 o'clock in the evening, when the sun sets, live in darkness. But we will not allow fossil fuel in the country. I think that's a very unfair argument. We'll have to allow Indians also to grow. We'll have to ensure availability of affordable, low-cost power to power the engines of growth in India, just like fossil fuels powered the engines of growth for United States and Europe and Japan and Australia and all the developed world. So for the last 150 years, all these countries have been indiscriminately using fossil fuel to power their industry. They have highways, they have ports, they have factories, they have jobs for all their people. All of that has happened on the back of low-cost energy. By the way, for some of you who don't know it, India consumes less coal on a per capita basis even today than what the United States of America used to do in 1860, 150 years ago. So I don't think India alone can bear the burden of the cross. And despite that, India probably is the only country where we tax carbon. We have a $6 tax per ton of coal that is mined, which money goes to serve renewable energy, to promote renewable energy, to subsidize renewable energy, to improve the environment. No other country, and my then Environment Minister Javadekar and I, in a conversation at the highest level with the United States, actually pleaded with them that why don't you tax carbon? You have promised to provide $100 billion in the Clean Energy Fund, but have not provided a single dollar cash on the table. Whenever it comes to supporting renewable energy, the argument of the West is we'll put you in touch with the private sector. Governments and the people of these countries don't want to do anything to promote renewable energy. And I don't need the government of the US or European governments to put me in touch with the private sector. I can do it bilaterally on my own. So it really reflects the very, very poor commitment and action on the part of the developed world to really do something to improve renewable energy and make it more affordable. In fact, more often than not, they'll say, talk to the private sector to get technology. They won't even help to get low-cost technology. So we were recently trying to look at how we can save further damage to the environment through hydrofluorocarbons. But I don't find the Americans willing to offer that technology. All that they say is we'll put you in touch with our private companies and you can buy that technology. So overall, I find a very, very poor response, particularly from the developed world when it comes to fighting climate change or addressing the concerns of climate change together with the rest of the world. Still, India doesn't give up. We talk to them, we continuously have a dialogue with them, and I do hope at some stage the Western world will start realizing they'll have to be more proactive to support countries like India, which really want to do something to save the environment. I've already talked about the role of the states. We are working very closely with the states and I really have no problem with them. In electrification, you had asked a question about availability of power for all the villages and all the homes. The Prime Minister had set a target of 1,000 days on 15th August 2015 to ensure that every village in India at least gets connected to electricity. I'm happy to share with you, we'll do it in 1 year before schedule. We'll do it in 765 days instead of 1,000 days by 1st of May 2017. And we are hoping that every home in India can be connected with electricity by 2019, 3 years before the original target of 2022. All of this information, by the way, is available on mobile apps, which any of you can download on your phone, which will give you real-time data, 24/7 real-time data on the availability of power, on our efforts towards energy efficiency, on our efforts towards rural electrification, and various other initiatives of the Government of India. Lastly, you wanted to know about our focus on sustainable growth for 1.2 billion Indians. Obviously, we are looking at sustainable growth. If we were only looking at short-term temporary fixes, we wouldn't have spent the last 2 years creating a robust foundation on the back of which we believe India is now poised to grow for the next 30 years. I'll just conclude by quoting Ruskin Bond. In fact, he was a great fan of Mussoorie, I'm given to understand. In our imperfect world, there is far too much talk and not enough thought. I'm happy that all of you there are thinking and planning for a better future for India. I'll be happy to receive your suggestions. I'll be happy to know more about your deliberations in Mussoorie and how IMA and the participants of this roundtable and Government of India can work together for a better future for India. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goyal. We will now open up our question with your permission to do that. But if you not
I can't make out what you're saying.
We thank you for those opening remarks. That was wonderful. They set the floor. We will now invite questions, and I permission we'll open the floor for questions. But if I can just kick off by asking you on the matter of center-state issues that have to do with the ministries that you are looking after. So you alluded to the fact that states are being cooperative. So clearly there is electricity and the state electricity boards, and on mining there are local issues, tribal issues, environment clearance issues, forestry issues. So I don't want you to go into the nitty-gritty, but I just want you to give us a feel that the center-state relationship will work fine and your policies will happen as intended.
Now, what is the last line? The center-state relationship?
The center-state relationship will work effectively, and the policies that you are intending will be executed properly. Because without the
I'm very confident the center-state relation really doesn't have any major problem. In fact, if you see the discussions of the GST Council also, they've had very, very fruitful engagement with the states and the center working together. Sometimes politics overtakes good economics, but these are temporary setbacks one has to take in your stride. But by and large, other than political posturing, when it comes to brass tack working, by and large, save and except election time, we don't find any problem in center-state relations.
I would now like to invite Dipesh Nanda, he is with GE Industrial, to ask the question.
Honorable Minister, my name is Dipesh. I work with GE. My question to you is on gas-based power. What is your plan to utilize gas in our energy mix, given that it will help you balance informed power with firm power? It will help the country reach its environmental goals, COP21 commitments much faster. And the fact that we seem to be in a long cycle for sub $6-7 of gas price, so the affordability on gas-based power.
Just repeat this last part.
Okay, and the last part is that we seem to be in a long cycle of sub $6 per MMBTU gas price, which probably addresses the affordability question.
No, it's garbled. Just speak on that camera maybe.
Okay, so the last part,
slowly.
Yeah. The last part was that we seem to be in a long cycle of low price, which is less than $6 MMBTU gas, which probably addresses the affordability question. So 3 points: firm power versus firm power. Second, environment cost, and third is affordability. How do we get your vote on gas-based power for this country?
Well, I am very keen that all the gas plants, and we have 24 gigawatts of gas plants in India, we are very keen that they get a sustainable, assured supply of a reasonable price gas. Unfortunately, gas is not available for long-term contracts, and we are usually left for gas pricing to be discovered through the Henry Hub or other exchanges, because of which states are not willing to commit that they will buy power from the gas-based plants. Today, affordability is a very important element. While gas prices today may sound affordable, but by the time the LNG gets shipped to India, regasified, transported to the power plants, power becomes quite expensive. I've already appealed to countries around the world to see if we can get low-cost, assured supply of gas, maybe for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and I'm willing to do large volumes. If somebody can tie in gas, maybe the gasification, shipping, regasification, end-to-end solution, which can assure gas-based power at a reasonable price, then India can afford to have it. It surely is a good balancing power, particularly when we are giving a thrust for renewables. So we will value gas-based power, but it will depend on the pricing. We have supported for the last 2 years through the Power System Development Fund, through a subsidy to help the gas-based plants come back on stream. We are considering to see if we'll support it for another 2 years. But possibly in the long run, the only solution is if we can get low-cost, assured supply of gas for the country.
Can we go to Neeraj Bisaria? Neeraj Bisaria will ask a question, sir, LM Wind Power. But quickly on the gas, are the Qataris going to be able to offer that deal to us? Because we will be the largest consumer of energy in the world. China is slowing, America is sorted.
Well, if you know anybody there and can help me get gas at the prices that we are looking for, get in touch with my office. We look forward to that.
Namaskar, मैं नीरज बिसारिया. I work for LM Wind Power. We are world largest manufacturer of wind turbine blades. My question is that you already said that India has a most ambitious plan for renewable energy. We are working to support that. But what is your take on GBI with generation-based incentive, whether it is going to continue?
Well, I must tell you, Mr. Bisaria, that any incentive or subsidy can only help an industry in the initial period get a boost. But in the long run, if you will permanently remain wedded to subsidies and incentives, then that will become a limiting factor to your growth. So my own personal take is every industry should move out of subsidies and become independent of and stand on its own feet. This is what we did with LEDs. Look at the big success all over the country. This is what we did with solar and had a honest, transparent bidding. Look at where the prices have come down. The wind sector has resisted transparency and wanted the cost plus basis. Now you're feeling the stress of that because cost plus is inherently prone to misuse, inherently prone to corruption. So I'm glad that now some of your wind people have started talking of bringing more transparency and honesty in this sector. This government is committed to bringing down costs of power. You will have to support that effort, and that can only happen with scale. Scale cannot happen on the back of subsidies. So it's a holistic thinking that you will have to do in your sector.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Goyal, the next question will be from Rajesh Mishra, Vulcan Technologies.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Rajesh Mishra. Basically, your department has done a very good job in the last 2 years. Everybody knows, and especially the power generation, there is a surplus. Power is available, but still, you know that factories and the residents of India are suffering because of shortage in several states, mainly because of the distribution of power through the state electricity boards. And due to your Uday scheme, now the 16 states are already agreed. Still, some states not agreed. But when you think that your slogan for 24/7 will be applicable to all the residents, and everybody will get the power 24/7. And most important thing is that when your Uday scheme is fulfill that in what you have got idea, the loan will be decreased for the boards, and their cost will be reduced. And most important thing that the industry should get the lower power tariff, because the main problem is that for the industries right now is the power cost is very, very high and compared to other countries. So most important thing, it should not be increased further, then it will benefit to us.
Well, I don't think power tariff for industry in India is higher than all the other countries. There may be 1 or 2, 3 countries where power may be cheaper than India, but by and large, most parts of India, I've been verifying the power tariffs for industry also is still amongst the lowest in the world. And I personally believe farmers of India, the poor of India, will continue to enjoy lower power tariffs, and I think they deserve that. All of us, all of you sitting in that room, will agree with me that the poor of India who are barely making 2 square meals a day, or the agriculturists of India who are already stressed with small land holdings, problems of rain-fed agriculture, poor productivity, until their incomes go up and they are in a position to afford full price power. I think India as a nation owes it to the farmers and the poor to give them lower costs of power, some of which gets cross-subsidized by commercial and industrial or big residential consumers. Having said that, the stress in DISCOMs is more because of inefficiency, power theft, AT&C losses, high interest costs or burden of old loans. That is what Uday has sought to address. It's a process that cannot be an overnight magic wand. Takes some time. Rajasthan had 80,000 crores of losses. Tamil Nadu has 68 or 70,000. Uttar Pradesh had a similar figure, 50,000-60,000. So the stress was pretty deep in the system. I'm quite confident that in the next 3 to 4 years, India will move towards 24/7, assured power for all sectors. We've drawn up state-specific plans how we will ensure 24/7 affordable power. All states in the country and union territories, except Uttar Pradesh, have signed up on that 24/7 document. UP has promised to sign up by August. So we have a cogent plan with each state, and I think they should be available on the website also. Are they all on the website? All these 24/7 documents and all my agreements under Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana, Uday, are available for you to monitor our work, to hold me and all the states and the Discoms accountable. So we believe in the highest level of transparency. All of it is available for you to study and figure out which are the good states where you should focus your next investment.
Mr. This is interesting speaking from Leone Cables. I have a question related both to solar and Make in India. We have started manufacturing products which will be used in the by the solar module manufacturers in India. My end product, when it is imported directly by my customers, is duty free. Whereas I manufacture, I have to import components which have to pay full taxes. But unfortunately, we have approached Ministry of Finance. There has been no positive response on it. So we find that we are not able to market easily in India, and also the employment that we had started in India is not sustainable. We would like to expand, and we would like to have the government support on it.
No, why don't you write me a mail? This is something, inverted duties is something this government is committed to right sizing. So if you give me more details specifically, I'll be happy to address it. Having said that, the zero duty on imports is more because of a protocol that was signed in Singapore many years ago to promote renewable energy or electronic products. I think once that expires in September, we'll have a relook at the zero import duty on imported equipment also.
You recently assumed charge. You recently assumed charge in the mines industry. So, can you tell us what your thinking is in the longer term to attract capital, domestic capital, and foreign capital into mining? Because in order to have best practices in the mining industry, we need foreign capital. It's not about the money; it's about the process, the technology, the way they do business. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Because you alluded in your opening remarks that you had a meeting recently with a representative from a big mining company.
Well, that was more to understand what are the international best practices. There are some things that are done internationally which India cannot do. For example, internationally there's no auction of mines. They allow people to approach the government and give out areas for exploration and prospecting and then further mining. Because of the peculiar situation we have in our country where a lot of this then is prone to corruption, we have, in our wisdom, we have thought it better to have a transparent auction mechanism, which we are going to implement. I think the international companies will be happier with that, because they know that after that there won't be potential risk like it happened with the cancellation of coal mines by the Supreme Court. So we believe that the transparency we are bringing in the system will give an equal opportunity to all to participate. Other than that, I do believe foreign companies are facing stresses, particularly when it comes to acquiring land and running through the maze, the bureaucratic maze. I'm trying to see if we can bring that also online. So all the approval processes will be transparent, will be online, will not require any interface with government officials. That's the process I've already kick-started in mining. More ideas, I'm still new to the ministry, but I'll welcome any more ideas that any of you in your group who understands mining would like to share with me now or maybe by mail later.
So the approval processes online include those given by the states, right?
Yes, that's right.
I'd now like to invite Sanjay Bhutani from Bosch & Lomb to ask a question.
So good afternoon. You talked about renewable energy, fossil energy. Can you give some insight on the nuclear power, like which was talked about during the Congress government?
Well, the Congress did enter into the original engagement with the United States in 2008, but unfortunately between 2008 to 14, there was no movement in the nuclear side. So when we came into government, really there was nothing happening on nuclear. Of course, this department is not under me, it comes under the Prime Minister, and we are looking at this, taking this forward. But we are very keen to expand our nuclear power generation, subject to two caveats. A, it should be affordable. It should not land up increasing the cost of energy. B, we want the highest safety standards. We don't want to compromise on the safety of the people of India at all. So, subject to these two, we are very keen to promote nuclear energy. You are all aware that we have tied up with several countries for supply of fuel, uranium. We are looking at technology, we are looking at addressing suppliers' liability issues. We were very close to getting into the NSG membership, but may take a little longer, but we are very confident we'll get there. And all of these efforts of the last 2 years will help us then move into the nuclear power generation. But I don't see that happening overnight or in the very near future. It has its own process time. So, thank you.
Wait, no. I know this is not your beat, but I mean, you have a ringside view. China has been playing very awkwardly on the NSG stuff. Do you believe it will sort in the next 12 months?
I didn't understand. Sorry.
China has been playing very awkwardly on the NSG membership. Do you think it will sort out in the next 24 months?
Well, I can't put a time limit to it because I'm not doing the negotiations. But these are diplomatic and international engagements where one doesn't rush into anything. It's a very patient task. You have a lot of discussion, negotiations, and at the right time you may strike the right agreement. So these are things where putting a time frame or a time limit is never advisable in national interest.
I know I speak on behalf of everyone when I say how grateful we are for your time. We are very proud of the good work that you are doing, and we just wish you well and success, and God bless. Thank you very much, Mr. Goyal.
Thank you. Thank you.